Welcome to Your Thoughts, Your Reality Radio with your host, K. William Spencer. This program is geared to help you see what thoughts and or beliefs are holding you back from being your best for yourself and those around you. Your life is only as good as your thoughts. For more information, visit our website at www.ytyrradio.tk. That's www.ytyrradio.tk. Now, here's your host. Hello, welcome to Your Thoughts, Your Reality Radio. This is K. William Spencer, your host as always. Today we have a very unique person. I met him not too awfully long ago, and he reminds me a bit of me, which is probably scary for you, the listeners. The fact that he is a person who speaks directly. In other words, he doesn't leave you pretty much guessing what he is saying. Not trying to say, this is what he says, this is what he means. He also happens to be a book author. His name is Brent Pearson, and he writes under a pen name of, now get this, Eva Marie Paulliere. Okay.
Paulliere,
pardon me, I'm sorry. And he is the author of, well, among other books, Two Stories Trilogy, Asuka's Confession, and One Woman. Now, he's going to explain to us why a man, very as you heard his voice, very much a man, is writing under a woman's name and some of his stories. He's also going to give us a look into his life, about how he transitioned from one point into his life into another, and it's a very interesting story. So I hope you'll stay tuned and listen to how he tells it. Because you know, this is the purpose of the show, is to let you hear how others in their lives have transitioned from something that was not serving their life very well or their community, and how it has changed them and the transition they went through, so you can say, okay, this is something I can relate to. So, Brent, tell us a little bit about your stories, what you're writing, and, well, you take it from there.
All right. Well, my books are aimed at women mostly, and it just happens to turn out that way. You could describe, say, the Two Stories Trilogy as a romance. It begins that way. It has some spicy scenes, but that's not the focus about it. They're philosophical reflections on the dating scene, sexual interactions, and just the ironies of life. Just to give you a brief overview of that. Now, of course, you may wonder, why are they called the Two Stories Trilogy? It's a bit of a contradiction. And the reason why that is because for my very first book, I wanted to make something unique in its storytelling. So I told the story first from his point of view, and then from her point of view. So therefore you have two stories. In the very beginning of the book, it says love is not one story, but two. His story and hers.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And even when I originally published the book, it was called Two Stories. I changed the name, and one of the reasons I changed the name was because I corresponded with a gentleman named James N. Frey, he writes these how to write books, my favorite of which is How to Write a Damned Good Novel. And I asked him, could you please read and review my book? And I'm sure he gets probably tens of thousands of these requests. And I was surprised to even hear back from him. His response simply was, you need to change the title. And I probably shouldn't have done this, but I argued with him on it. I said, are you kidding me? You know, the book is two stories. It's his and hers, and this is what people know me by, blah, blah, blah. And then I decided to get over myself, and I'll just simply call the series Two Stories, so that way people who searched for the book could still find it. I renamed it to Cheryl's Secret, and he said it was much better. Now, moving on, after that book, I wrote two others. And if you'll notice, if you ever take a look at the Amazon reviews, you'll see that the people who have read the first book have also read and reviewed the second and third books. As far as the third book is concerned, I still have some more people still in the process of reading and reviewing that one, just because it's fairly new. It only came out like about a month or two ago. Anyways, that's mainly what I'm known for as an author. I've written another book in the same sort of vein as that first one, being like romantic, philosophical, sex comedy, called Ménage Trouble. Mm-hmm. And then I have two other books that are a departure from my writing style. One of which is Asuka's Confession, which is the story about a woman who is trying to escape the Yakuza in Japan. And she's offered a way out that forces her to transform who she is to someone who's gone from being a submissive piece of property to a refined avenger. It's actually the kickstart of a series I plan maybe about 4 or 5 novels in the Asuka series. She eventually escapes and works for the CIA to take vengeance upon the people who killed her friends. Lastly, we have One Woman, which is a favorite of mine and a favorite of the fans, which is about a man who wakes up with amnesia. And his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra, is taking care of him. Now, she tells him, okay, I'm Cassandra, I'm your ex-girlfriend. You broke up with me, but you never told me why. So there's the first mystery. He can't remember, and he never told her. But the story's actually much deeper than that. You see, Paul falls in love with Cassandra once more, as she aids him in his recovery. However, she's concerned that he'll get his memories back, remember why they broke up, and it'll be all over. So Cassandra keeps him at arm's length. In the meantime, Paul's mother gets brutalized just outside the nursing home that she's staying at. We find that someone is after him and his family for reasons we don't know. Paul's confusion deepens as another ex-girlfriend enters the scene, but she doesn't care about whether he remembers her or not. So Paul winds up in a psychiatric hospital. Then gradually Paul and the reader find out that the people in his life are not what they seem. And I wrote it in the first person present tense, which I felt was appropriate for someone who has amnesia, and therefore the reader gets to experience Paul's struggle with what I call love, crime, and amnesia. And interesting enough, halfway through the book, the point of view changes from Paul's perspective to Cassandra's, and you can contrast the perception of each of the characters. So as you can see, it's a lot different than, say, the first several books that I wrote. I shifted gears. Maybe I just wanted to prove to my audience that I could write something besides sensual literature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a point, and I was hoping you would continue on, but we're going to let you go with that one for a while. I actually want to ask you to tell a little bit about each one of the books that we've spoken about just so far. Two Stories Trilogy, Asuka's Confession, and One Woman. But before we go into there, let's do a tiny slingshot effect here, and I think this is becoming a part of my show, just calling it Slingshot. We're talking about the present. We'll go back into the past a little bit. Let me start with this. For our listeners, when Brent and I started talking, I usually just want to get to know my guest just enough so we can have a conversation instead of an interview. And so in other words, my guests are feeling comfortable with themselves and they can express themselves freely, which is the whole idea of my show, because if I want you to be the listener to listen and hear the changes that this person is going through and what they're doing now, it has to be a conversation, because if I do a strict interview, it's like going through a history book. It's just nothing but facts. So, yes, well, when we did speak, Brent and I, we got into a conversation that I think it lasted for, well, the last conversation we were in, it lasted for an hour and a half. That's just how great a person Brent is. And he got into talking about his writing style and how he does research for his books. Because, yes, I would say that it is odd for a man to write under a woman's pen name, but also I just want to emphasize something else here, that Brent is married. So, and I mean to a woman. So, okay, so if there's any issues about his sexuality out there, he is heterosexual as far as I know. So, do you have children?
2.
Yeah, there you go. So, okay, it's a way of writing books when I don't believe he is the only one who's writing under a woman's pen name, so don't worry about it, people. Let me ask, well, we were talking about this yesterday. It's one thing to write a book on reality and experiences, and it's quite another thing to write a novel, because it turns out to be in its own right fiction. And you made this quote that came from Mark Twain that, paraphrasing it, is the difference between writing about truth and writing about fiction is fiction has to make sense. So
yeah.
Tell us about your research and how you actually prepare for the books, and then tell us about some more about your stories.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the very first novel that I wrote. And I'll tell you what that is based on, really. Before I got married and settled down, had children, I did a lot of internet dating. And there's this one date I went on which was memorable because it was this woman who's just dreamlike. She's thin, blonde, blue eyes, intelligent, perky, all these things that men really like in a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought that I really hit it off with her until at the end of the date, I kissed her goodnight and said, "When can I see you again?" And she says, "Oh, I'll check my schedule and get back to you." And at that moment, I couldn't take a hint.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's what happens to the character in the book. He goes out with an equally dreamlike woman, and of course, I embellish her a little bit to be even more exciting than the original person she's based on. And he can't take a hint. But what happens, though, is he gets another request to meet immediately afterwards from a cute half-Asian woman named Cheryl. And Mark, the main character, who's just gone out with Tanya, the hot blonde I told you about, he can't stop thinking about Tanya while he's on his date with Cheryl. As a matter of fact, he talks about it. And Cheryl says, "It's unlikely that you'll ever hear from this person again, but if by some miracle you do, I'll step out of the way." And so he stops talking about it, and he kisses Cheryl goodnight, but says, "Tanya," when he kisses her. And rather than some retaliatory judo move or smack in the face, she just utters, "Richard." So now we find out that Cheryl has someone else on her mind as well. They make a deal that they're going to help each other try to win each other's targeted amour. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine the complications in that sort of arrangement. And just getting back to my own personal experiences, one of the reasons why this came about as a story idea was because I often thought just how wonderful it would be if I just had a female friend coach me on how to handle women while I was dating.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I decided, okay, we got the reality part out of the way, and we're starting to embellish a little. Let's add in further complications. Like Cheryl has a full Japanese sister named Akiko, who is married just to get her citizenship. So she's actually fooling around on her husband, but it's okay with him because it's a marriage of convenience. She likes Mark as well. So they start competing with each other on it. So meanwhile, you have Mark chasing after Tanya, Cheryl, who's stuck between being attracted to Mark and Richard, and then you have Akiko, who's trying to steal Mark away from both of them. And yeah, and this is particularly upsetting to Tanya because Tanya's ex-husband had an affair with Akiko while they were married. And so you just have one of my readers described my books as in some books you get a love triangle. In my books you get a love octagon. Yeah.
I think even HBO would have a hard time keeping up with this, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, they're doing a pretty good job with Game of Thrones, as confusing as that is. So maybe they could handle it. I don't know. Anyways, I continued on with another 2 books after that, which I wrote over a year's time. The series is very popular with certain niche audience. I can't exactly classify the other 2 books as a romance, but they're fun and entertaining and have some sensuality in it. And for me, it's not just the praise I get from fans. It's as you mentioned, the transition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let me stop you right there for a moment before I lose the thought. You said there is some sensuality in it, and I want to make this point clear because I'm quite sure there's probably going to be at least a couple of people out there that don't understand the difference between sensuality and sexuality. This is just like the difference between some people don't understand between erotic and exotic. So, if you understand where I'm coming from. So explain the sensuality, because I think most people think sensuality means sexuality, and it's not necessarily so.
Sensuality, has to do, the root of the word is sense, okay? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about descriptive depictions with a lot of feeling and senses involved in the actual act, okay? Mm-hmm. Whereas something could be considered having sexuality in it, may not be as descriptive or have as much feeling and contact with the senses. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those where they're not exactly 2 different things. Mm-hmm. Okay, sexuality, and sensuality are related, but I think sensuality goes a little deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. No pun intended.
That's okay. We'll leave it there.
I just caught myself on that one.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, it's something that people don't understand, I would assume, because a lot of people are aspiring authors or aspiring writers, and they don't understand. Let's just put it this way. I took a few IQ tests, and I always come up as a wordsmith. And which is kind of ironic because, as I was telling you even before we started the show, I'm also an English teacher among everything else that I do. And to be an English teacher, you're basically a wordsmith because you have to teach your students what do these words mean. And in English, opposed to other languages, I won't say opposed to. I'll leave it as an open statement there. But in English, because it's my native language, there are certain words that you use to express an idea, and the more words, the more vocabulary that you know, the more you can express yourself. So it's not so much of trying to describe something. There is a word that's actually descriptive of what you're trying to say, instead of going through 10 sentences trying to explain a one-word concept. You use the one word. So you're a wordsmith as well. So it's a point of people need to understand that words have a certain meaning. So if you understand the word in its usage, it will take you to a different level altogether without having to go through, God, that was a long way to explain that. That kind of a thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's take, I could even use examples. Like, you could say Bachelor Party, that movie with Tom Hanks. God, I feel old now. Bachelor Party is an example of sexuality, whereas, say, 50 Shades of Grey is an example of sensuality.
Yes.
Both of them have sexuality in it, but the expression is much different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, anyways, you wanted me to talk about the transition, from being an author wannabe to actually breaking myself in and becoming a committed writer.
Okay, actually, I want to do that in the last half of the show.
Well,
But
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. It's just
yeah.
Well, while we're on this, we'll do the slingshot effect after the commercial break. But
Okay.
It's just more of I was asking, or I'm looking for. Is just let's stick with the present for the moment. Okay.
Okay.
Stick with the present for the present time. No, stick with the present for the moment. Just kind of going back into how you research for some of your books. It's like you were telling me about how you go to a bookstore and you buy several books, and what you go from there. I don't want to give away. Let you tell it.
Well, that's fine. Actually, while the initial, quote, research technique, unquote, was to take some experience that I had in life and embellish it, eventually I want to start writing more original stories that strictly come from my imagination. And what I did one time is, when I was suffering from writer's block that lasted for a good month or so, I, as you mentioned, went to the bookstore and got myself about 10 to 15 books of varying genres. Some of them were written in first person, some of them written in third person. I took that stack of books and just read one chapter of each one of them. And after having read a chapter of each one of them, I weeded out the ones that I didn't like. So I then proceeded to read a little bit more of each one of the books, not reading them for the sake of finishing the book, mind you, but to grasp the author's style. What I would do is, while reading, I would note down, okay, what is it exactly do I like about this book? How is the author telling their story? And most importantly, what does this author do that I don't? And I did a few passes through, just cycling through the books. I think I pared it down to like 8 books that I liked, reading, 1 through 8, then reading a little more, keep going through that. And I had to stop, because when I was doing this, the mental explosion, that irresistible wave of ideas surfaced in my mind to write a novel. And it's a wonderful and painful experience when this happens, because for me, the story comes all at once in my mind, and I furiously write it down before the ideas go away. That's how One Woman came about. Because as you can see, it's a departure from the other 3 books that I had written before. I hectically wrote down the notes and said, okay, this character is going to have amnesia. This woman is going to be his ex-girlfriend. I wrapped it out in like 16 days.
Mm-hmm.
the first draft. And from starting to pen the first draft to actually uploading it to Amazon took me about 2 months. Now, mind you, none of these books that I had read had an amnesiac main character in it or any of the other events in One Woman. It is simply a research of writing style. And this is how I hone my craft. It's not just sitting down and reading books that say, this is what you do in order to make your characters memorable, and this is what your plot structure should be. Although I do find those books, to some extent, good for editing your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would never want to start out reading a book that tells me how I should write my book before I've even started, because it's very inhibiting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And by the way, just go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you find yourself trying to emulate what somebody else is telling you, and you actually lose your own style.
Exactly. You see, with my particular drill or evaluation of writers' techniques, I find books that I like, and I learn from the other writers that I like, and I find things that they have in common with each other and incorporate it into my own style. Mm-hmm. rather than say, well, I want to write like this other person, or I want to make sure that I incorporate everything into my story that my 11th grade creative writing instructor taught me. No. I think if I did that, my readers would puke.
I'd still be writing like an 11th grader.
Yeah, exactly. You want to put out something that's unique. But still, I don't want to pretend like I know everything about writing either, mm-hmm. because there's still some very good things that authors that I like do. And so I did that. I made a totally original story from what I'd learned from reading these other works. And it turned out to be the best book I've written so far. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. This is what my fans are telling me. Mm-hmm. This is your best book. Even the 2 books I wrote later on, they said, you know what, One Woman was even better.
Yeah. Well, if you feel comfortable about it and others do, then I don't think it's a bad thing to say it's one of the best books that I've ever written, at least from my point of view as the writer. Because if, as you were telling me before, if you can't stand reading your own writing, who else is going to like it?
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I will tell you a phenomenon that occurred with me after writing One Woman is that the books that I wrote afterward were more difficult to do because I was trying to reach that same standard. It was particularly hard because, you see, I hadn't finished the 2 stories trilogy at the time that I wrote One Woman. Mm-hmm. So in order to write the 3rd book, I had to kind of like say, look, you're not going to take the 3rd book of this philosophical witty sex comedy and make it the same as the dramatic and deep philosophical work that you did with One Woman. So I had to get over myself and almost start over with a beginner's mind. I had to forget that I read that other work and get myself back in the frame of mind that I did with the first 2 books of the 2 Stories trilogy. And you know what? It actually worked out pretty well because the readers of that 3rd book said that even though they didn't like it as much as One Woman, okay, and this is kind of an apples and oranges comparison, they did say that it was the best of the series. Yeah. Cool. So, overall, I believe that I improved.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take our little commercial break right now, and we're going to come back with Brent Pearson, who writes under the pen name of Eva Marie Paulliere. So anyway, we'll be back with Brent Pearson right after these commercial breaks. Please stay with us. He has a lot more to tell us. Matter of fact, we might even do 2 shows. Not today, though. Okay, hold on, we'll be right back.
I love what Maya Angelou had to say about the power of the spoken words. She said, I quote, "Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning," end quote. And that is the reason I made the decision to put my words into an audiobook. So please check out my spoken words in my new audiobook, Your Life, Your Way, the 10 must-have goals to improve your life. It's now available. You can either go to my website at www.coachingbyria.com and purchase it there. You can also download the book from iTunes by going to the link I provided in the show page, or simply go to iTunes stores and put my name in the search, Coach Ria Wilkie, and you will be able to download the audiobook from there. And I do thank you all for doing so. And if you like to write a review, please do so. And I'm always grateful to be in service. Thank you.
Hi, this is K. William Spencer of Your Thoughts, Your Reality Radio. Come and join us every Tuesday and Thursday for enlightening, humorous, and intriguing conversations with my guest, or just a monologue of thoughts that I share, all to help you look at life and your choices differently. For more information, go to YTYRradio.tk. That's YTYRradio.tk.
Are you ready to put an end to thinking about how you wish it were and take action? Take this step to find out more by going to coachingbyria.com. And you can receive your free consultation session with Coach Ria.
Hi, this is K. William Spencer of Your Thoughts, Your Reality Radio. I'm just dropping by to give you a quick update of a few of my guests for the month of June. Recently, my guest was Lynn Branson, the author of Super Wise Me. And coming up, I have the author that goes by the pen name of Eva Marie Paulliere. Then we have country music musician Doug Briney, Robert Kennedy III, Lillian Brummett, Sandra Patino, and many more. Please join my guest and me every Tuesday and Thursday evening for inspiring and motivational conversations on personal successes, achievements, and sometimes awe-inspiring transitions. And as always, for current information, visit the website at www.ytyr.tk and the Facebook page, facebook.com/YTYR Radio. And remember, think great and have a great life. Welcome back to Your Thoughts, Your Reality Radio. Of course, I am K. William Spencer, and our guest today is Brent Pearson, the author of such books as Two Stories Trilogy, Asuka's Confession, and One Woman. We've been talking about some of his books, some excerpts from his books, and how he writes and researches for it. Now we're going to go do a little bit of a slingshot effect here, and Brent's going to tell us a little bit about what he did before he became the writer, and how he transitioned from that point to where he is now. So go for it, Brent. Tell us about it.
Okay. I actually wanted to start writing when I was 17, and it never really worked out for me. I would start a book, I would do a lot of talking about the books that I wanted to write, and that just never quite came off. However, though, during the time of, say, going from 9 years old to 41 years old, I did engage in several other artistic pursuits. For instance, when I was 9, I played the violin, and which graduated into playing in the orchestra in junior high and high school. When I was a teenager, I played the drums in what we'd like to call ourselves maybe a multi multi-style band. We did some jazz fusion, but we also did some top 40. I think our greatest performance was at the Cleveland Zoo. We did one there, as well as a couple of other performances in like community centers, that sort of thing. And after that, when I went to college, I took a drawing class. And interestingly enough, there's something I had previously thought, well, I'd sure like to draw, but I certainly can't. I convinced myself that I absolutely positively could not do it. Tried doing it, throughout my childhood and my teens. So I was lucky to have a wonderful instructor who not only told me the very basics of drawing, like doing perspective and shading and all that sort of stuff, but he allowed me to flex my imagination and do abstract works as well. And I stayed with drawing on my own for 3 years, even after I had finished taking that course in college. Later on, after having cycled through that and even drawing some cartoons, which, by the way, have yet to be published, I took the music a step further. And you're going to think this is kind of corny when you first hear it, but I got this software called the MTV Music Generator. Yeah, and it's a simple PlayStation program. They have one for PC as well that is aimed at you composing like hip-hop, techno, hard rock, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But I looked a little deeper into the program and found that they had orchestral samples as well. Yeah, so I have actually composed, using the MTV Music Generator, mind you, 9 symphonies.
Wow.
And 3 piano concertos.
So basically what you're telling us is your bend in life is towards the arts.
Yes, it is. It's not my only interest, though. I mean, I enjoy and I enjoy some of the more practical things. Like, for instance, for 11 years, my wife and I have been running a business together. So there is a little contrast, or you might even say rounding out there. While, my head is in the clouds half the time, I do have my feet firmly planted on earth in some, very cut and dry activities as well. So, given that, I mean, going back a little further, I actually, in my experience, have homeschooled children. So I have a background in education.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, after doing the homeschool project, I was an administrative instructor at a slate roofing company. Now this was interesting because not only did I train the executives on company policy, but I also helped some of the slate roofers to get their reading above an 8th grade level. And perhaps there is where my love of words came in and sort of seeped out into something, very practical and cut and dry. As a matter of fact, I think that when you're teaching someone to read and you're helping sharpen their grammar as well, it could only strengthen your expressive abilities in writing, in spoken English as well.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've been teaching on and off since my early 20s, and I was doing, like you said, I was doing corporate level, I was doing schools. I still tutor, even right now, down here in Mexico with the language tutoring. I've taught martial arts and all that kind of stuff. The thing that I've always noticed is that teachers, if they're really dedicated teachers, they will learn while they're teaching, if you understand what that means.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. I would have to say that all of these experiences culminated in my finally writing the books. You see, what I did, though, is I discovered one thing that I wasn't doing that I should have done the whole time, every time I attempted to write a novel. And it's so ridiculously simple. See, when I was 17 and wanted to be a writer and wanted to write all these stories, I would tell everybody about the stories I wanted to write, and I would start writing it, and I'd have my friends, read what I'd written so far and all that, and even like later on in my 20s, I'd start writing something and I'd get distracted, whatever. And the reason why I think the book that I wrote, the first book that I wrote when I was 41, the reason why I actually pushed it to completion is because when I started writing it, I didn't tell anyone what it was about.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if you look on Amazon, there's a book written by me, by my own name. It's called True Stories, publishing the first novel on Amazon. And it goes into the one thing that's going to kill your book writing project every time, and that's telling people about what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree, because it's pretty much the same thing I did with creating the radio shows. Like, not really telling anybody about this. I'm just going to pop it up, then I'll tell everybody about it. So, believe it or not, in my first month on having a page on Facebook, I had over 5,000 hits on my Facebook page alone.
Wow!
In my first month. So, yeah, you have to put in your effort and then pop it out and go, there you go. And people go, wow.
And it's something you just outright did, rather than bragging to your friends about what you're going to do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that's the key difference. More metaphorically, I put it in this writing guide, is this. When you have a mental explosion that drives you to want to write a book, you can express it through your mouth, or you can express it through your typing fingers, but very rarely both.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of mental steam it takes to write a novel.
Yeah, my own experience, if you don't mind me interjecting here real quick, is that if you keep the thoughts to yourself and you express those thoughts on the paper, I think it's just the way the mind reacts to it. You've told it once, let's go move on to something else. But if you sit down and write it out, that's where you wanted it to go in the first place. Your mind is still actively working towards, here, this is where you want to put it, this is it. Once you got it down, all you have to do now is just go back and proofread it. But if you tell it, your mind is already gone, the story's already told, we're not going to go back to that.
You have a very interesting point there. Yeah, it's like once you've told the story, you've already accomplished your goal.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and even further to say that, this is the difference between a writer wannabe and a writer. And I don't have anything against writer wannabes. I was one for 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference is that the writer wannabe wants to be admired for the book he wants to write, and he wants the admiration for himself, you see. If I'm sitting across the table and telling you, hey, this is the book I want to write, wow, isn't this a cool idea, I may get some admiration from you, and you might go, wow, Brent, that's a really cool story idea, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But as a writer, as opposed to a writer wannabe, I'm going to just write the book and let you read it. And then your admiration is not for me, it's for the book you've read. As a matter of fact, if you're a writer, most of your admiration is never going to be leveled at you. It's going to be leveled at the book. Once you publish, your book is going to be read by thousands, tens of thousands, 100,000s, or maybe millions of complete strangers who will never come to you and say, you're a fantastic author.
Uh-huh.
Okay? So you want to put the emphasis on the product, the actual book that you wrote and how cool that is, not how cool you are. The writer wannabe wants to show everybody how cool they are. The writer wants everybody to think that their book is the thing, is the object of admiration.
Yeah, exactly. It's the difference between giving me acknowledgement for something that I want to do, which is not lasting, versus here's the finished product, and you're going, yeah, thank you. Everything's right there in the book. That's what I was thinking. That's what I processed through. That's the end result. I'm hoping that will. It's the difference between, as you said, drawing attention to me or drawing attention to what I have written, and maybe that's helped somebody, even if it's just in the fantasy world, just to get lost from the world for a little while.
Yeah.
Which is the first part of just saying, I'm going to write a book. That doesn't do anything for anybody. It's just like, oh, yeah, cool, pat on the back. Yeah, let me know when it's done. And it's never done, so that's the only appreciation you'll ever get.
Yeah, precisely. And also, it's an appreciation that I find unfulfilling. There's nothing more fulfilling for me than to read a good review that someone has posted on Amazon for one of my ebooks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's how I made the transition. Is I didn't tell anybody. But even after I wrote the first draft, the story's not over there. You see, I didn't tell anybody what I was writing, but I did. It's hard for me not to do this. Tell people, yes, I am going to write a book, and I am writing a book. But you'll find out what it's about when I'm finished with it. So I gave a little teaser for my friends, families, and business associates, and I did get some admiration for that, which was okay. I mean, they said, "Wow, you're going to write a book? That's fantastic!" And I had my friends, relatives, business associates were like, "I can't wait to read it." So when I finished the first draft. Looking back, this is something I should have never done, especially only on a first draft. But I emailed it to everybody I could possibly think of, and no one read it. No one. Yeah.
All the pats on the back, and nobody cares now.
Well, and I started to reevaluate. Maybe I should get new friends because because they were like, oh, yes, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it. So this went on for about 2 months. I became a big baby over this. And I'd cry to my wife. I'd say, no one's reading my book. And she goes, well, I read it. I said, wives don't count. And besides, she didn't read the book. I read it to her while she sipped wine in bed. Okay? So I think I could have read her grocery list, and that would have been fine. She liked the book and all that, and I still had the problem of, I wrote this book, but no one's reading it. And I furiously went on Facebook, and I started friending friends of friends, people that I didn't even know, just so I could message them and say, hey, I wrote this book, could you read it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did this to such a degree that Facebook suspended my friending privileges for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, they do it for weeks now, but that's okay.
Well, I'm glad I'm out of that phase of begging people to read my work, because I probably would be banned by now. I finally found someone on Facebook. I decided to message Ellen Clare, who is a British fantasy novelist. And I said, I am interested in reading your books, which is the total truth. And she had some really fantastic cover artwork and synopses of some of her stories. And I said, wow, this is something I really want to read. And by the way, could you read my book too? Mm-hmm. So she did, and she sent me her work. I sent her mine, and we gave each other a mutual critique of each other's works. Her critique on mine was 7 pages long. I looked at this. She said she liked the book, but she listed very tactfully, by the way, and I do thank her for this, very tactfully some things that could be improved about it. And I looked at my first draft, and I said, so this is why no one's read my book, because it sucks. That's being, brutally honest with myself.
Yes, we are our own worst critics.
Precisely, but still, there's some truth to that statement, because after revising the work on Ellen's advice, and then reading a little bit of how to write books, and going back to it several more times, those Facebook friends started to read it. And so there was something to that. I even remember one time, this one lady who just honestly told me she couldn't finish reading the book because she didn't like it. I sent her a copy of the final, revised, proofread draft, and she told me, there's so many improvements here, I just don't know where to begin. And so I learned something. I mean, when you write that first draft of your first novel, you can get a pretty big head about it and be completely blind to any flaws in it. And that's why nowadays I only send my first drafts to Ellen, because she's a writer like me. Mm-hmm. And she understands these things. She offers very good critique of it, and she sends me she's comfortable sending me her first draft work. So in addition to writing, getting broken in as a writer and getting people to read my books, I made one of my best friends who I've never met in person as Ellen Clare, British fantasy author. And by the way, just type in her name, Ellen, Ellen, of course, Clare on Facebook, and if you write her, she'll be happy to send you one of her books. Yeah. And so the next thing I learned is it's important to have a team, because after that I got other what I called beta readers. And for people who are listening who are not familiar with what that term means, it's simply someone who reads a book before it's published and offers a general critique of it. So now I have actually about 3 or 4 people who read my books before they're published, and it's important. I mean, yes, you should write for yourself at least the first draft, and it comes from your imagination and it's personal, but I think the writer should also keep in mind that yes, your writing is for other people to read. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, just write a journal entry.
Exactly.
I
love that.
There's nothing wrong with it. Listen, there's nothing wrong with orally telling your stories if you want to do that, as in the writer wannabe, okay? And there's nothing wrong with writing a book just for yourself. But if you're going to cross over into that publishing something, well, then you see your book as a commodity, and it's open to scrutiny, to those people who would either purchase it or consider purchasing it. So you really have to keep your reader in mind and not just what entertains you. And by the time, from making your first draft of the book and, making the final revision of it, you'll see a transformation in your own writing, and you'll realize, okay, this is something that I find hilariously funny, but offended the last 3 people who beta read it for me, so maybe I'll leave it out of the book.
Yeah, it's kind of like telling a joke, and it sounds good to you and to somebody else that knows what it means, but somebody that does not know what it means at all, it leaves them gasping. It's kind of like what I was telling you yesterday about what we used to say in conversations. Just when the conversation comes to a halt, we just say something, makes people think, and then they start laughing probably about a minute later, depending on the person's knowledge and background of what you're thinking, and then fine. But other people, they just sit there and go, what? I don't get it. And if you have to explain a joke, it's not funny.
Yeah, exactly. Very few comedians could even ever pull that off,
Mm-hmm.
where they explain a joke. But some, maybe even the explanation sometimes
Yeah.
be kind of funny.
Well, we have about another 3 or 4 minutes, so Brent, tell us, do you have anything as a final suggestion, words of wisdom, anything that you would like to tell our listeners? Because, before you actually go there, I haven't, just being totally honest here on the air, I haven't had the chance to read his books yet, but this week has been terribly busy for me. So, but after listening to Brent, and if he writes like he talks in his conversations with me off air, as well as what you have heard in his conversations here with me on the show, I've already gotten spellbound by what he has written, and I do believe I'm going to have to find a way to get the books down here in Mexico. So I would thoroughly encourage anybody. He is one who he doesn't. In the hour program that we've had, he doesn't have the ability to actually grab your mind like he did with me in the pre-interview. And he tells a story both verbally and how he writes it in a way that he just grabs your attention, and you're just like, I don't want to let go. But I got to go to sleep, or whatever it is you have to do. So I think it's going to be the way that he writes is something that if you're looking for something that grabs you and doesn't read like a history book just full of facts, this is boring. No, he grabs your attention because he does his background research. He knows how to, as you said, what was the one you said before about doing so many twists and turns? Some people write about 3 people and you do about 8. It's just a wonderful way of writing, and these are the kind of books, these are the kind of even movies, when I look at something, it grabs my attention and holds me because it's not boring. It's thrilling to read it. So anyhow, Brent, yes, any final words there?
Yes. Now, the spelling of my pen name, Eva Marie, EVA, then MARIE, the last name is PAULLIERE, and that's how you can find me. But, sometimes I wish that I made my pen name something like Linda Smith.
Yeah.
So, if you really want to find me easily, okay, I made a website that's called authoreva.com, AUTHOREVA.com. Simple.
Beautiful.
And that will tell you all about, it'll have book synopsis. It'll show some of the books that I've written which have received some third-party endorsements. And, links to Facebook pages. There's another radio interview I did, earlier on in my career that you can listen to on that as well. So that's I think I'd just like to end off with that little plug. If you want to find out more about my books, that's a website that you could go to. And also, I am always happy to hear from anyone who has any comments about my books and wants to know more about them.
Beautiful.
Just go to that website.
Okay, in that website, does it have a link to your Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Because you're doing basically like I do with my website for the radio show. Everything just comes out of there. So, okay, wonderful. Because I was going to say, if you had a website or a link to Amazon, we'll do it. But you got it straight to your website. So that is www.authoreva.com.
Yes, sir. And it's just simply, if you like what you see, there's a link for every single one of my works on that site. And also an email address where I can be reached at.
Beautiful. Well, thank you once again, Brent, for being part of our show. And like I said, if you ever want to do another show, just let me know. We'll be glad to have you here. And for everybody else, thank you for being here. We're going to end the show today, and we'll hope to see you next time around. Take care. Be well. Thank you for joining us here on Your Thoughts, Your Reality Radio. Please make a note to join us again on our next broadcast. For more information, visit our website at www.ytyrradio.tk. That's www.ytyrradio.tk. Our theme music is Soul Controlled by B.O. Crew under a Creative Commons License 3.0. See our website for more information.